5, 4, 3, 2.
Yugi Bros! What up guys, it's Yugi Bros, and today I'm bringing you my first place deck profile from our locals. Now our local store, Kerwin's Game Store, actually just recently reopened for events, and they have speed duel tournaments every Saturday at 1 p.m. So we were able to get one of these off, and I came in first, and originally I was going to hold back on the video because I didn't want to showcase my decks per se. I would rather showcase other players' decks, but what I'm going to do from now on is whatever wins every weekend, I will post the first deck list, and I will also post any deck lists that, you know, seem interesting or kind of out of their ordinary, because I love creativity in this game, and I think it's like one of this game's strong points, so I would love to see what people can come up with. But I figured I'll post this since I haven't posted actual deck profiles or duels in forever, and believe me when I say that stuff's coming back to the channel for sure. So let's get into this. So we're playing Interconflict. This is easily, in my opinion, the best skill in the game. Once during your main phase, you can pay half your life points to take control of one monster your opponent controls until the end phase, but it cannot attack directly this turn. You don't care. Normally you play it in like tribute type decks, and that's what we're doing. So you're actually going to see this iteration of tribute summon deck is actually probably the most popular in the speed duel format right now. But mine comes with a twist because I love throwing together like random extra things. We kind of mixed two engines together. But Interconflict is easily the most, I guess I'd say oppressive skill there is, just because of how versatile it can be. And whatever you take, you can still attack with, it just can't attack directly. So you could take a big monster and swing over a smaller monster, or you can take something else and do what most people do with it, and that is just tribute it off the field. But it's spot removal that gives you a free tribute at the same time, or just free extra damage, and that's really strong, especially when you can pay half your life, so it's always live. That's what makes it the most cutthroat, is like if it said pay 1,000, you know, you'd be limited to using it at certain times. But being able to pay half, you could be at 50 life and pay 25, and this is still live. So we played Interconflict as our skill. Now for the main deck, we play 3 Grand Marg the Rock Monarch. This is just a solid card right now. It says if it's tribute summoned, you target a set card on the field and destroy that target. It's really strong, especially in the mirror match. They tend to set a lot of back row, so this kind of clears that. But also, if they have set defenses, a lot of people are playing Midoriya or Old Vindictive Magician, and this is good to get rid of that. This card's solid. He's 2400. He's a little weak in the defense, and a lot of the times they'll book a moon this face down. But if he's destroyed his card, he's essentially done what he's supposed to do. And this is a resource deck in general, so if your cards essentially trade for one of your opponent's cards, then they've done their job. The whole point is you're trying to make every card you play in here essentially trade for 2 cards of your opponent's and just outnumber game your opponent. So if this does kill a set card and then swings over a monster, it's killed 2 cards, it's done its job, it doesn't matter what happens to it at that point. If it sits on the field longer, great. If it dies immediately afterward, that's okay too. It's done what it's supposed to do. So 3 Grand Marg, and I understand this ratio is a little high. I have since tweaked the deck. I tweak my decks every single week, and it doesn't matter if I think this is still the strongest thing going into, you know, next weekend's tournament, for example. I like creativity and I like changing things up. In my opinion, the way to play this game is never settle. Never settle with what you're playing. Always change it up a little bit. Especially because, you know, now everyone saw me play this over the weekend. They're going to expect it and side more for it. So time to switch it up on them next week, right? So 3 Grand Marg. Then we play our other 2 tribute summons, which is Kaiser Glider. Now, this card is really, really good. I think this is underrated, this format. It depends how much XYZ is in your tournament scene, and it also depends how much of the mirror match is in your tournament scene for this card, in my opinion, to be used. He's 2400, 22 defense, can't die by battle with monsters with the same attack. So in the mirror match, you're dealing with this card a lot, you're dealing with Jinzos as well. This card can swing into them, their monster will die, and this will not. You've traded your 1 card. However, this has another effect, which is really, really strong, and that says, if it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you target 1 monster on the field and return the target to the hand. Against XYZ, this is really, really powerful because you can tribute summon this without fear, and then if they XYZ it later on and pop this, you bounce their XYZ back to their extra deck, and that's really, really good. It's good spot removal. Be aware though that this is mandatory as well as this, so both of these effects can backfire on you. If your opponent doesn't have any set cards and you summon this and you do, you are forced to target one of your own set cards and destroy it. Same with this, if they don't have anything to return and you have something on your field, you are forced to bounce. I did have a game where I played against XYZ where I had this and a Kaiku, and I swung and they killed it with Offerings to the Doomed, and this was forced to bounce my Kaiku back to my hand. And in the XYZ matchup, that's strong because Kaiku has the floodgate effect of your opponent cannot banish their own cards. So they threw my Kaiku back into my hand. He basically 2-for-1'd me off an Offerings to the Doom, which is crazy, and he was able to banish his stuff next turn for his materials. But I mean, it is what it is. You kind of have to run into stuff like that. This is still a very, very strong card for the format, I feel. So those are tribute summoned monsters, and onto the level 4 lowers. We play 3 of what I still consider to be the best card in Yu-Gi-Oh! In Speed Duels, and that is Breaker the Magical Warrior. This card says if it's normal summon, it gets a spell counter. It gains 300 for the spell counter. You can only have a max of 1 counter on it, but you can remove that spell counter to target a spell and trap on the field and destroy that target. And this is very, very strong. It's a solid MST in a body. You can make this 1900. You can swing into monsters that are lesser than 19 or 19 and crash, or you can get rid of a back row card and then still have this to hopefully kill something else. Like I said, if it killed a spell or trap, it's done its job to replace itself, and if it kills a monster, then you're up 1, basically. And this card is basically one of the best resource management type cards in Speed Duels right now. In my opinion, this is the greatest card Speed Duels has that is not this dumb skill. So 3 Breaker for sure. You'll see that in a lot of decks. Then we play my personal twist to the deck, and that is 3 Apprentice Magician and 2 Old Vindictive Magician. Now, early on in Speed Duels, when the Battle City box first came out, there was a deck going around for a while that was basically this deck, but its tribute summon monsters were Dark Red Enchanter and this package. And this package is really cool. Apprentice Magician says if it's summoned, you target a face-up card on the field that you can place a spell counter on and put a spell counter on it. So for example, if you have Breaker on the field already, and you were to summon, or let's say this was in defense and flip summon an Apprentice Magician, you can put a counter on this if it didn't already have one and pop a spell or trap. So what's really strong is, like, especially if you have this set, like if you floated into it, Apprentice Magician's other effect is if it's destroyed by battle, you can special summon a level 2 or lower spellcaster monster from your deck and face down defense position. So let's say they kill this, right? And you set a different one, and you go into your turn and you have Breaker, and they have 2 back row. You can normal the Breaker, gets a counter, use its effect, pop 1 spell or trap, and hopefully it's not like Book of Moon where they got, flipped it face down. Then you can flip Apprentice, give it another counter, and then have it pop another card. It can only keep 1 counter at a time max, but if you can get rid of the counter and then put another counter on it, it's a really good combo. In addition though, this card does float, so especially if they have a lot of monsters and they're trying to swing, this can set either this from your deck in face down defense or this. And I see a lot of Conflicts decks playing Old Vindictive Magician. I don't actually know why, by themselves, without Apprentice Magician. If you're playing this engine, then I completely understand the verification of playing this. I don't understand, though, the people that just play this. I would just replace it with Nidoria, because Nidoria doesn't have to, it isn't limited to flipping and destroying a card. Yes, you can flip and then tribute the monster, but Nidoria is an actual body. It's 1200. It actually does a lot of damage. I like that better if you're not playing the Apprentice package, but if you are, obviously, then you're going to play this because you could set this. But what's nice about having 3 and 2 is that you can floodgate your opponent with 3 monsters. You can immediately have this set into this. A lot of the time, you'll set the same amount of apprentices as your opponent has attacks, and then you'll end with setting a Vindictive. And then, going into your turn, you'll flip Vindictive, you'll destroy 1 card they control, and then you'll tribute this from one of your 2 tribute monsters. And what's nice about that is you didn't have to waste the skill immediately. I feel like the person that plays this skill first, especially in the mirror match, is usually the one that loses, because the longer you have to play around this card, the longer you are playing like the catch-up game, so to speak. And the longer you hold this as a player, the better off you are towards the end of the game. Like I said, you can pay life. It doesn't matter how low your life is. You can pay half, always. So this doesn't have to be used right away. It's really, really strong. And what's nice about Apprentice is we're in a go second format. This deck wants to go second to tribute an opponent's monster. XYZ usually wants to go second to just get that extra advantage. Relinquished, even though you don't really see it that often anymore, likes to go second to absorb an opponent's monster. And what's nice about this deck is this deck can go first and not care. The best turn 1 I feel like in this deck is set Apprentice Pass. You don't even have to apply back row. By just setting Apprentice by itself, you get to see how aggressive or how reserved your opponent is, depending on what they do to this card. And if they're aggressive and they go in really fast, then you know to then set the Vindictive and hopefully go off the following turn. But if they're a little more reserved, you can set an Apprentice or their Apprentice and just wait on it and just feel it out, basically. Just setting this card and passing to me is like a really, really strong play, just because you get to see how your opponent plays and deals with it. And I don't know, I just really like this package. It's nice. It's a little more defensive than offensive. We don't play the charging guys or the Kaikus in the main because we are playing this. But what's nice about this is it gives you more versatility and lets you play around things that you otherwise couldn't play around because you were playing more offensively. To finish out the monsters, we play Triple Sphere Corribo. I don't feel like this card really needs much of an explanation. It's still the best hand trap, one of the few only hand traps in this game. But it is basically when your opponent declares an attack, you can discard this card to switch their monster to defense. Right now, a lot of people are playing Night Beam, so I really, really like this card in addition to Book of Moon. That way, even if they Night Beamed your face down and you couldn't respond with it, you always have an extra defensive card in your hand, assuming they're not playing Twisted Personality and discard it out of your hand. On to spells, we play 2 Night Beams, speaking of which. This card's really good. A lot of people don't see this coming, even though it's been popping up a lot more in decks lately. You target a set spell or trap your opponent controls, and you destroy the target, and your opponent can't respond with the target. They can't respond with the targeted card to this. They can, however, if they had a Zoma, let's say, and something else that you targeted with Night Beam, chain the Zoma and then chain the card you targeted. They just can't respond directly to the Night Beam, so that is a way to get around it. But in my opinion, if you Night Beam and they're forced to flip 2 cards for the resolution of this not resolving properly, this is just 2 for 1. So even if, let's say, both cards are Zoma, and you Night Beam a Zoma, they chain the other Zoma, and they get another Zoma, now you have the information as to what both back row are off just 1 card, and then you can basically determine how to go from there without having to deal with another face down. Like, it gives you the information, and at the very least, that was really a strong way to get them to use 2 cards for 1. Then we play my other favorite card in here, Creature Swap. This actually got me my first invite in Advanced Format Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in 2012. Good times with this card. This is really, really strong with this package because now you have the ability to essentially not only feel out how your opponent plays, but let's say you have an Apprentice die, and you set enough for Apprentice because you have a Creature Swap in hand. Now they have a big monster on the field, let's assume. Right? Flip summon this the following turn, Creature Swap this to their opponent, take their big monster, and then you can run into the Apprentice, and then Apprentice's effect will trigger in your graveyard, allowing you to then keep setting like another Apprentice or an old Vindictive. This is a lot of advantage that you otherwise wouldn't get from this deck normally, that I think gives it the tempo that it definitely always needed. This deck, I feel like, is more tempo-based than the regular one, because the regular one is summon, beat, stick, swing, occasionally, eventually steal one of your monsters, tribute it, good. This, I feel like, has more options and more versatility to mess around with, and gives you a little bit more of a longevity in a tournament, but Creature Swap is strong as hell. And another thing too is if they have 2 monsters and you Apprentice into a Vindictive and you have a Creature Swap in your hand, next turn you could flip Vindictive, pop one of their monsters, and then Creature Swap for their other monster. They're forced to give it to you at that point since it's the only one they have. You give them a 450 attack monster. It's also nice to then tribute things and then swing over this, or just take their monster and swing over this, because you know it's just free damage that's going through. And against XYZ, and this is a little lesser known fact, but giving them one of these 2 options prevents them from filling their board with XYZ monsters, so sometimes it actually comes up in handy as well. And then finally, the last card we play in this deck is Triple Book of Moon. This is the best spell in the game. Target a face-up monster on the field, set that target in face-down defense position. Strong card, super good against literally almost everything. Definitely makes more use of Grand Mark's effect, setting a monster and then tributing something next turn to summon Grand Mark to destroy the set monster that you flipped off book. And Book is just obviously the most versatile thing you can play whenever. It's a quick play spell. You don't lose the Jinzo with it, yada yada yada. As for the side deck, we played 1 copy of Jinzo just for those big heavy trap decks. We don't play traps in this deck, so we could actually essentially main this, but a lot of people don't main a huge amount of traps unless it's Zoma the Spirit, in which case we usually have enough things to deal with it in the main deck. But Jinzo's just solid, negates all traps. I mean, what more can you expect? Then we play 2 Kaiku. the Ghost Destroyer. If our opponent is playing XYZ, this is obviously the better card. In my opinion, this and Lost Wind are strong. Like, these are the two cards you're bringing against XYZ, but this, as a body of just they can't banish, and when it inflicts damage, you can banish up to 2 monsters from the graveyard, gives you, like, a big push in the fact that then the only thing they are limited to is their Union Scramble. But then you have the one Lost Wind in the side deck usually to deal with the final problematic card, and if this is in your grave and they summon from the extra deck, you can bring this back as a set card, which is nice. It does get banished after the fact, but you get 2 uses out of 1 card, which is, you know, the whole point. And what's nice about Kaiku too is, let's say they're going heavy into like a Nobleman to Crossout package for your Vindictive and your Apprentice. If you feel the need, you can side some of them out for Kaiku. It's just a beat stick in general, and it's 18 and it can banish things from the grave. That's just a solid effect in general. So that's a good thing. And the last 2 cards I played were Gimmicks. They were Waking the Dragon. The reason I played 2 is because at my locals specifically, this is the most heavily played deck at our locals, the Monarch deck. So because Grandmarg is forced to set cards, you could basically set it up so like turn 1 you set the Waking, and you keep like a Book of Moon or whatever in your hand, so you know when they're going to drop the Grandmarg or the Breaker and they target this and they're forced to hit this, you can Waking the Dragon. But they definitely don't expect 2. However, the downside of Waking the Dragon is once they see Waking the Dragon, they will play around your back row, which is good and bad. It's bad because if you're playing the second copy, they may not hit it. So it comes down to you side in 2 against aggressive players and you side 1 against reserved players. Once the reserve player hits this once, they'll most likely play around this for the rest of the game, but aggressive player usually still goes through with it and tries to hit as much as possible, and they won't expect usually you playing a second one, which is really, really good. And our targets for that are Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, just because he's a big, beefy beat stick. Arcana Knight Joker, which is one of the 2 main things we summon off of this card because it's 38 and can negate cards that target it by discarding the same type of card from your hand. So if they target it with like Book of Moon, you discard a spell and you get the Book of Moon. But he's 38 too. We have the Ryo Senshi and we have the Alligator Sword Dragon. I like these just for niche situations. This can swing directly for game depending on what your opponent's playing. And this is a nice card as well. But the main thing is we're playing 2 copies of Thousand Eyes Restrict. And that is because you're playing a tempo deck, let's play a tempo card. If they pop Waking the Dragon, this summons to the field. This says nothing can attack except it. So depending on where in the turn they popped this can be really strong, especially if they've already wasted their skill. To just drop this, sit on it in defense mode, wait for them to pass to you, absorb one of their cards, and then either tribute this off or set it with Book of Moon. Like, you can turn this on and off basically more easily in your deck than your opponent can deal with it by just it being on the field. So again, it's almost like the concept of Mystic Mine, where you sit on Mystic Mine until you have enough cards that you can play the game. You could sit on this, especially if they've burned this already. If they haven't burned this, you can't really sit on it, but if they burn this already, you can sit on this for 1 to 2, maybe even 3 turns. I wouldn't push it, and just wait to draw extra cards to combat your opponent if you're not there yet. But also just absorbing cards is just an extra sweet effect of this card, and you have ways to turn this off more than your opponent does if it's face up, so it's just a solid card for that reason. But guys, that was my first place undefeated deck profile from our locals this past weekend. Be sure to check this channel out for first place deck profiles from that tournament. I definitely will try to keep up with that. It's every Saturday at 1 p.m, so expect a video either Saturday or Sunday or maybe Monday. I'll try to get them out faster than this one obviously came out. And I definitely want to mess around with a few other decks. I've got a few other options right now that I'm testing that I kind of want to mess with in the tournament. If I play this, I feel like, you know, everyone's going to expect it at this point and they'll know how to deal with it, so I might want to spring something new on them, of course. But guys, as always, comment, like, and subscribe, click the notification bell. Tell me in the comments down below what you think of this list, if you like, love, or hate any of the card options, and I will see you guys in the next video. Yugi Bros out. Peace.